Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I'm going to take you through a complete tier ranking of the Innistrad Crimson Vow Commanders. This includes the main set as well as the Innistrad Crimson Vow Precons. So we're going to be starting off in Tier D, which is the weakest tier, and working our way through C, B, and A, all the way up to the most powerful tier with Tier S. Just a quick disclaimer before we jump into this, obviously these tier rankings are based off of my own opinion, and your opinions might differ, and that's okay. Also, these tier rankings are going to be done within the vacuum of Innistrad Crimson Vow, meaning that this is the commanders that are within this set and the precons in comparison to each other power level wise, and not compared to commanders outside of the set. So an S tier from Crimson Vow might only be an A tier in something like Innistrad Midnight Hunt, and yeah, again, vacuum. Again, this is the power levels of the commanders from this set and from this set's precons in comparison to each other. Also, within each tier, the commanders are in no particular order. So if I bring one up first within a tier or I bring one up last, it does not make a difference. It doesn't mean that one is more powerful or less powerful than the other. They're in the exact same tier. And as always, a huge thank you to Eddie for all the great discussions on these commanders and these rankings. And yeah, a big thank you to Eddie, but of course also, if I make any mistakes on this episode or any other episode, if you don't like the picks on this episode or you know what the tier rankings are, make sure you blame Eddie because it's always Eddie's fault and not mine. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. So let's start things off with the lowest of the low, the D tier, those bottom dwellers at the bottom of the set. Okay, maybe that was a bit too insulting, but yeah, these are definitely the weakest commanders from this set. And first off, and not surprisingly, hey, a mono-white commander! Catilda Dunheart Martyr, you are most definitely in the D tier. Catilda is a Star Spirit Warlock for 1 white that's got flying, lifelink, and protection from vampires. Power and toughness are going to be equal to the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments. And there's a disturb cost of 3 white. And by disturbing it out of your graveyard, or however you say that, you are going to get an aura called Catilda's Rising Dawn. It's going to enchant creature. Enchant creature's going to have flying, lifelink, pro vampires, and it gets +X for X the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments, or basically just, hey, Catilda, but on another creature. So yeah, this mono-white commander seems to be very much a, Voltron-style commander with maybe some enchantments or some spirits in there, whichever you'd want to kind of lean on. But yeah, this commander doesn't provide kind of any extra value or any real card advantage or anything like that. And since you're in mono white, that's a major downside because, well, you're in mono white and it's definitely the weakest of all the colors. It needs help kind of where it can get, especially from the commander. So one that's just basically a Voltron style commander, or one that's going to kind of be an aura that kind of makes a creature into a Voltron, really isn't going to be all that impactful. So yeah, Catilda, you have most definitely earned your spot in the D tier. I'm very sorry. I'm sorry. Not really. Anyways, moving on, next up we've got Dorothea, Vengeful Victim / Dorothea's Retribution. Hey, look, another creature that turns into an aura with a disturb cost. I wonder why it's also in the D tier. Anyways, Dorothea is a 4/4 spirit with flying for white-blue that has when it attacks or blocks, sacrifice it at end of combat. So yeah, you just lose it when you attack or block. And of course, you can pay the disturb cost for 1 white-blue, and it switches over to Dorothea's Retribution. Basically an enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, create a 4/4 white spirit creature token with flying that's tapped and attacking, sacrifice that token at end of combat. And again, if it would be put in a graveyard from anywhere, you exile it instead. So yeah, other than just being a 4/4 flyer, the front side of this commander does nothing other than, just wanting to, get off your board on its own. So yeah, that is going to be problematic. Obviously, that does kind of allow you to then play the backside, which is nice, but not all that impactful to the point where it's like, hey, I'd like to cast my commander, get my commander to go to my graveyard, then get my commander back as an aura, and then if that creature's ever dealt with, you just lose it, and you have to do it again, but for an extra commander tax to go through all those steps to get it back. Yeah, this commander is pretty terrible, and that's why it is most definitely in the D tier. So yeah, disturb apparently just means D tier. That's D for disturb. Get it? Anyways. Moving on, we've got, oh my goodness, Odric Bloodcursed. You, by far, deserve to be in the D tier. Maybe if there was an E tier, this would probably even make that. But yeah, Odric, you are... Well, let's just get into the card. Odric is a 3/3 vampire soldier that costs 1 red white, and he has a lot of text, so here we go. When Odric Bloodcurse enters the battlefield, create X blood tokens where X the number of abilities from among Flying, First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample, Vigilance, found among creatures you control. Count each ability only once. First up, 2 major misses on this card. Well, Odric doesn't have any of those, and yes, it's basically a 3/3. Odric very easily could have just had one of these at the very least to just ensure that you're getting at least 1 blood token instead of just being a 3/3 that does nothing. Secondly, yeah, counting each ability only once is hot garbage in my opinion. Why? Why? So in order to build around this commander, you kind of just need a hodgepodge deck with a bunch of creatures that have miscellaneous abilities that don't really work together at all, and the payoff is what? You get a couple of blood tokens? Cool. Yeah, again, if there was an E tier, Odric might make that one. But yeah, I wasn't willing to, just have Odric on his own in the D tier because the other 2 commanders were also pretty awful as well. But yeah, Odric, you most definitely deserve to be in the D tier. And yeah, a special mention to you in this tier because you're pretty awful. Really awful. Maybe the worst commander of the year. Anyways. Now it's time for us to move away from that hot garbage and onto slightly less smelly garbage. Just kidding. Anyways, with the C tier. So at the C tier, we've got slightly more powerful commanders, though these are not quite even to the middle of the road with the B tier, but we'll get to those here in a bit. Anyways, to start the C tier, we've got Geralf Visionary Stitcher. Geralf is a 1/4 human wizard that costs 2 and a blue that has zombies you control have flying. By paying a blue and tapping it, sacrifice another non-token creature, create an XX blue zombie creature token, where X the sacrifice creature's toughness. So this is not a bad effect, it's just one that, well, since you're limited to mono blue, it could have been better. If you had access to black as well, zombies you control have flying would be much more impactful, since in black you've got access to, well, the best zombies. Since you're stuck in mono blue, you're basically just going to be utilizing, again, miscellaneous creatures most likely that probably are not zombies, but that probably have high toughness, and then you can, pay a blue to tap and sacrifice them to make a giant flying zombie, which is still just a token. It's not a bad commander by any means and is most definitely, a good step above all those D tier commanders, but it's just not quite there. Again, if it did have black in its cost as well, I would probably bump this one up to the B tier, but alas, Geralf is Geeseless and is therefore mono blue. So yeah, Geralf, congratulations on making it to the C tier on your own. But now let's move on to a card that, well, I actually very much enjoy. Old Rutstein. What are you buying? For those of you that haven't played Resident Evil 4, this will always remind me of that. Anyways, although Old Rutstein is probably one of my favorite cards from the actual set, it is not a very powerful commander by any means. It is a 1/4 human peasant for 1 black-green. It says when it enters the battlefield or at the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. If a land card is milled this way, create a treasure token. If a creature card is milled this way, create a 1/1 green insight creature token. If a non-creature non-land card is milled this way, create a blood token. This is basically just Druidic Satchel as a commander, so yeah, not overpowered or even very powerful by any means. It's some nice incremental value throughout the game, but yeah, it's not doing anything anywhere near game-breaking or threatening to your opponents pretty much at all. That being said, I very much love Old Rutstein, and you can probably find me at a table saying, "What are you buying?" Plenty with this commander. But still, sorry Old Rutstein, you definitely belong in the C tier. So, here you go. Next up, though, we've got Strefan, I still don't know how to pronounce this name, Morer Progenitor. This is one of the 2 precon commanders, and you'll have to see, actually, if the other one actually made it out of this tier. Well, we'll get to that here in a bit. Anyways, a 3/2 Vampire Noble with flying that costs 2 black-red. It has at the beginning of your end step, create a blood token for each player who lost life this turn. And whenever Strefan attacks, you may sacrifice 2 blood tokens. If you do, you may put a vampire card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Now, in my opinion, this commander just kind of wants to go in different directions. You get payoffs for making all your opponents, lose life in a turn, so you can get a bunch of blood tokens, which is nice. So, you might go a little group slug with that. But you also kind of need to go or want to go in a vampire tribal direction. And yeah, just kind of sacrificing 2 blood tokens to get 1 vampire into play once a turn there really aren't all that many high-end vampires that cost a bunch of mana that you really care about cheating out. There's a couple, but not a ton. So it's really not doing all that many powerful things. I mean, if the blood tokens were instead, hey, sacrifice 3 blood tokens, get any creature, yeah, that would be a lot better. So yeah, I think just pretty much Strafan or Streffen is in between two worlds and kind of gets the best of neither, and yeah, that's why it has most definitely, in my opinion, finished in the C tier. Moving on though, next up we've got Lorraine, the Diversion. I'm really bad with all these names, I'm so sorry. I'm not doing this intentionally and not trying to do it in a fun way. Lorraine, the Diversion, and Camber, the Plunderer. These are some partner commanders, and yeah, I believe that they belong in the C tier. I'm thrown off by their names, I'm sorry. Anyways, Lorraine is a 3/3 human rogue with First Strike, and she has pay 2, sacrifice an artifact or creature, go target creature. And then Camber is a 3/4 vampire rogue for 3 and a black with lifelink, and it has, whenever a creature dies, you gain 1 life and create a blood token. So obviously there's some nice synergy between these two commanders when they're both in play. Basically, hey, sacrifice a creature with Lorraine to, goat a creature, and then also you get a blood token and 1 life when your creature dies. So then you can also sacrifice that blood token if you want to goat another creature. Obviously that can be pretty mana intensive, and the payoff is okay, but not all that great. So again, because of the need to have essentially both of these partners out to really make the most of this whole thing, and the need for a good amount of mana to actually sacrifice those creatures, which are then going to be sacrificing artifacts, it just very much is kind of just below a middle-of-the-road commander, in my opinion, and it's definitely going to finish in the C tier. And speaking of partner commanders in the C tier, let me introduce you to Rhoda Geist Avenger / Timon Youthful Geist. Rhoda is a 3/3 human soldier with vigilance that costs 3 and a white, and it has, whenever a creature in opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, put a +1 counter on Rhoda Geist Avenger. And then Timon Youthful Geist is a 3/4 spirit with flying that costs 4 and a blue, and it has, at the beginning of each combat, tap up to 1 target creature. Basically, hey, tap creatures, make Rhoda giant, and swing through and take out your opponents with this Voltrani commander that has a control aspect to it. But, if Rhoda gets dealt with, you need to start over and grow it again. And yeah, you're not really doing much else outside of that. You're not really getting a lot of extra value outside of just growing Rhoda. So yes, you can definitely, be more useful than those D tier commanders, but when it comes to power level, it's still not quite middle of the road. So Rhoda and Timon, my apologies, but you did not quite make it to the B tier. You're stuck down in the C tier, but at least you're not in the D tier, so yeah, enjoy your time there. And speaking of the B tier, we made it to the B tier. We are at those middle-of-the-road commanders that are, well, more powerful than the Ds and Cs, but not quite to the As, and most definitely not to the Ss. And to start off the B tier, we've got Henrika Dumnathi / Henrika Infernal Seer. Henrika is a 1/3 vampire with flying that costs 2 black. She has, at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Each player sacrifices a creature, you draw a card, and you lose 1 life, and transform Henrika Dumnathi. So essentially, there are ways to work around this, but basically you had to pick each one of these once, unless you pick to transform Henrika, then you just straight go up to the back. Making everyone sacrifice a creature is nice, and if that was a repeatable effect, that'd be really nice. And of course, drawing a card for 1 life is well worth it. Regardless, eventually you get the pick to transform her. When you do, on the back, you've got a 3/5 flying, death touching, life linking vampire. So yeah, basically it's a vampire nighthawk, but slightly larger, that has pay 1 black. Each creature you control with flying, death touch, and or life link gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So kind of like a mass temporary pump effect for your creatures that have those, keywords, which is nice, not overpowered, not underpowered, just nice middle of the road. So Henrika Dumnathi, congratulations, you are the very first commander that I am bringing up in the B tier. Moving on though, we've got Edgar, Charmed Groom. Edgar's getting married. And then there's his coffin. Magic story. Anyways, Edgar is a 4/4 vampire noble that costs 2 white that says other vampires you control get +1/+1. And on top of that, when Edgar Charmed Groom dies, returns to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. It transforms into Edgar Markov's Coffin, because that's morose. Anyways, a legendary artifact that says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white and black vampire creature token with lifelink and put a bloodline counter on Edgar Markov's Coffin. Then if there are 3 or more bloodline counters on it, remove those counters and transform it. Just overall, this commander is very middle of the road. Okay, it can give you some tokens when it is the Coffin. It can also pump those tokens, slightly being an Anthem. But yeah, it's kind of like a slow process, just giving you 1 token on each turn. So 2 things actually bump this commander up from being in the C tier to the B tier, and kind of without those things, well, it definitely would have been in the C tier. The first is that it is decently hard to deal with. Again, if someone just wraths the board, Edgar dies, you actually just flip it into the Coffin. There are other ways, obviously, to get rid of it. An opponent could exile it, or, they could actually destroy the Coffin by destroying an artifact. There are ways to get rid of it, but it does have some kind of hardiness to it, if that's the right word. And actually, the other thing that just really pushed into the B tier is that, yeah, there are just a ton of vampires that are very powerful. So just kind of in any vampire tribal deck, you have a leg up on a lot of other kind of, tribal decks especially. So yeah, for all these reasons, Edgar, you have made it to the B tier, which I guess congratulations, because you might not have really deserved it, but again, because of those other factors, you made it. Regardless, next up in the C tier, we've got Millicent, Restless Revenant. Millicent is a 4/4 Spirit Soldier for 5 white-blue, and she's going to cost 1 less to cast for each spirit you control. She also has flying, and whenever she or another non-token spirit you control dies or deals combat damage to a player, you get a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So yeah, there's actually a decent amount of support for a spirit tribal out there, and a lot of fantastic low-to-the-ground spirits that can really help you out. So get spirits on the board, get Millicent into play, make more spirits. If someone rasps the board, you get spirits back. Then you can cast Millicent again and get more spirits out. Have fun. I think overall this is just a good middle-of-the-road commander. Again, spirits are definitely not the most overpowered tribe out there. I'm looking at you, elves, dragons, and vampires. Yeah, I mean, spirits are good, and the ones that are going to be in this deck can be very effective for it, and this commander can make the most out of those cards. Millicent can both be a, board wipe insurance policy, and also, a token creator too. So flood the board with your spirits and be somewhat protected from a board wipe, and swing with spirits and hit your opponents and have fun. So Millicent, congratulations on making it to the B tier. But let's move on to the next commander in the B tier with Helena and Elena Partners. They are a 2/3 human ranger with first strike and reach that costs 2 red-green. They have at the beginning of combat on your turn, put X++1 counters on another target creature you control where X is Helena and Elena's power. That creature gains haste until end of turn. So this is kind of like, and I hate to say a weaker version of Xenagos, but it's a weaker version of Xenagos. Whereas Helena and Elena pump based off their own power, Xenagos is going to pump based off of that other creature's power. So not only do you have to get kind of, impactful creatures out with this commander alongside of it, but you also have to pump this commander to make that pump even more impactful. That being said, it's definitely not a bad commander, and one that, again, you can do different things than Xenagos, where you can actually focus on ++1 counters and things that work well with that. So, yeah, just overall a pretty middle-of-the-road commander that can do some powerful things, but also has limitations as well. So, Helena and Elena Partners, welcome to the B tier. Next up, we've got Anya, Maid of Dishonor, and actually, in comparison to the original Anya, this is definitely a pretty dishonorable card in comparison to that one. Anyways, this Anya is a 4/5 vampire for 2 black-red. Whenever Anya, Maid of Dishonor, and/or 1 or more vampires enter the battlefield under your control, create a blood token. This ability triggers only once each turn. I really hate that text in Magic. Regardless, by paying 2, you sacrifice another creature or a blood token. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. I mean, pretty much the one saving grace for this card, again, like Edgar, is, hey, vampires, you got a ton of them out there to pick from. Here you go. Slap vampires in this deck, and it'll probably work okay. There's a decent payoff, again, by being able to pay 2 and sacrifice a creature or a blood token to drain your opponents, so yeah. It costs a decent amount of mana to do that, but, if you can build up enough resources, you can drain your opponents pretty quickly once you're set up properly. And again, it should be easier to set up with this commander, but again, this ability only triggers once each turn. I hate that text. I really do. So, Anya, because of those limiting factors, but also because, you are a vampire tribal commander, congratulations, you have just somehow, by the skin of your teeth, just made it into the B tier. Next up, let's talk about another kind of tribal commander with a vampire commander that is not a vampire tribal commander. Or I guess it could be if you really want to. Anyways, Runo Stromkirk is a 1/4 vampire cleric with flying for 1 blue-black. When Runo enters the battlefield, put up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. In the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card. If a creature card with mana value 6 or greater is revealed this way, transform Runo. It transforms into Krothis, Lord of the Deep, a 3/5 Kraken horror with flying. And whenever it attacks, create a 10th and attacking token that's a copy of another target attacking creature. If that creature is a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or a Serpent, again a sea monster, create 2 of those tokens instead. So yeah, if you can flip this commander, which it's not, all that difficult to, but you do have to have some effort to actually flip it, then you're going to be able to have a decent payoff. Again, being able to attack and make multiple copies of some sea monsters can be really spicy. So this commander does have some setup required, but it can have a really big payoff. So yeah, just a good commander overall. So because of all those factors, Runo Stromkirk, or maybe should I say Krothis Lord of the Deep, you have made it into the B tier. Moving on though, next up in the B tier, we've got Timothar? Timothar. I'm just going to call you Tim. Baron of Bats. Although Magic already has another Tim. How about Timmy? Okay. Anyways, Timmy is a 4/4 vampire noble with ward, discard a card, and he costs 4 black. He also has, whenever another vampire you control dies, you may pay 1 and exile it. If you do create a 1/1 black creature token with flying, it gains. When this creature deals combat damage to a player, sacrifice and return the exiled card to the battlefield tapped. So first off, incredibly flavorful card. You know that old kind of story where you have vampires that can turn into bats and then turn back into vampires. This is basically, hey, all your vampires do exactly that. Now, being limited to mono black is probably really what made this commander finish in the B tier instead of the A tier. There's a lot of good vampires, that have access to red as well, or white. Unfortunately, you're just in mono black, so you don't get access to those. And also the fact that you need to actually hold up mana to actually pay for that to be able to exile your, vampires when they die. That's also kind of holding this commander back just a little bit. I'm not saying that I don't agree that that shouldn't be part of it, but if that wasn't there, if that was probably free, it might bump it up a tier as well. So again, a very flavorful and cool card, but again, because of those limitations, I am very sorry, Timmy, but you have only made it to the B tier. Although, actually, you know what? That's still an accomplishment, but you probably could have been one step further in the A tier had some small things changed. Speaking of which, let's talk about Donal, Herald of Wings. Donal is a 3/3 human wizard for 2 blue, and he has, whenever you cast a non-legendary creature spell with flying, you may copy it, except the copy is a 1/1 spirit initiative to other types. Do this only once each turn. I actually really like the design of this commander kind of overall. It's just that those limiting factors on it just make it kind of fall into the B tier, whereas it kind of had more potential to be a bit more powerful without those limitations. First off, like Timmy, well, Donnie? Let's go with Donnie. Donnie and Timmy. All right, anyways, Donnie is limited to just being in mono blue, and yeah, if you literally just change this to an Azorius commander, I definitely would have bumped it up into the A tier, 1 tier above, because there are plenty of good flyers, yes, in blue, but there's also a ton of good flyers in white as well, so having access to both would be great. Also, do this only once each turn. Again, once each turn, I just don't like seeing that on cards. Wizards, please stop. Regardless, obviously, you can still get, a good amount of value from getting an extra copy of something. Although it's even, just smaller, getting one extra copy of one creature can give you extra value. Again, if it's got an ETB or maybe an attack trigger or something like that, you can get extra value from just casting your flyers and, yeah, having fun with a commander like this. So, Donnie, you joined your friend Timmy. I don't know if the human wizard and the vampire are friends, but maybe they are. Anyways, you've joined your friend Timmy in the B tier. But now it's time for us to move away from those middle-of-the-road commanders and up 1 tier further to the A tier. Those commanders that are so powerful that they're above the middle-of-the-road commanders, but not quite powerful enough to be at the top tier. So to start things off, we've got Olivia, Crimson Bride. Olivia is a 3/4 vampire noble with flying and haste that costs 4 black-red. She has, when she attacks, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. It gains when you don't control a legendary vampire, exile this creature. So Olivia is a reanimating commander that, well, can just reanimate right away, because again, she's got haste and she's got flying, so she can usually get through on at least one opponent. And yeah, the creature that she brings back out comes out swinging right away. Obviously, again, there is a limitation to this card. You don't just get to keep that creature forever. If you don't have any legendary vampires, that creature goes away permanently. Now, there are ways around that. You could, before you lose your legendary vampires, sacrifice that creature so it goes back to your graveyard so you can get it back again. Or again, in these colors, especially with black, you can, maybe just, hey, target creature, when it dies, comes back into play. There's plenty of cards that do that. Then sacrifice the creature and get it back permanently without that exile clause. So yeah, a repeatable reanimation commander with an attack trigger in red, which again, you have extra combat spells you can utilize. Yeah, that's a really powerful thing. And actually, there's some infinite combos that can go with that as well, but we're not going to get to that now. Regardless, Olivia has definitely earned her spot as a commander in the A tier. Moving on, though, we've got a very different commander with Umbra's Fear Manifest. Umbris may start off as a 1/1, but don't worry, it's going to get much, much bigger than that. It's a nightmare horror that costs 3 blue-black. It's going to get +1/+1 for each card your opponents own in exile, and that's going to be a ton. Because whenever it or another nightmare or horror enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent exiles cards to the top of their library until they exile a land card. So when this comes into play, start exiling. When, you blink it, start exiling. When, you bring it back from the dead, it's again one of those, when this creature dies, returns to the battlefield, exile things. Also, whenever you get other nightmares or horrors in play, exile things. So yeah, this commander can actually go in a couple of different directions. You probably could mill someone out with this because, again, if they don't have a ton of lands in their deck, well, you can churn through that pretty quickly, you know, by getting more creatures in play or by blinking this, etc, etc, etc. And you also can very quickly and very easily just make this into a one-shot kill that even if it's dealt with, well, those cards that your opponents own are going to remain in exile, so when it comes back into play, it's going to be even bigger by exiling even more cards. And yeah, if your opponents try to deal with this, of course, in these colors, again, you've got plenty of ways to protect it, again, either by blinking it or bringing it back. So it's going to be tough to deal with, and it can hit incredibly hard. So yeah, Umbris, congratulations on making it to the A tier. Next up, though, let's move on to Toxrill the Corrosive. Toxrill is a 7/7 slug horror that costs 5 black. It has at the beginning of each end step put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token. And by paying blue-black, you sacrifice a slug to draw a card. This commander, if it wasn't for its incredibly high converted mana cost at 7, probably would be an S tier commander. If this stays in play, your opponent's creatures are either going to get very, very small, or, you know, get very, 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 dead very quickly. And then when your opponent's creatures do die, you get slugs, which you then can sacrifice to draw cards. Yeah, this slime counter on every single end step, including your opponent's thing, is an incredibly powerful thing. So yeah, if you can keep Toxrill in play, you can easily control the board and take over the game. But again, Toxrill is going to probably have a big target on its back, and again, if it gets dealt with, it's going to cost 9 next time, then 11, and then 13, and yeah, things are getting quite expensive. But yeah, Toxrill, when you can stay in play, you're an incredibly powerful commander that can really control the board, and if it wasn't for your incredibly high converted mana cost, well, you'd probably make it into the S tier, but unfortunately, at 7 mana, you are in the A tier. Next up, though, let's move on to a commander on the other side of things with a very low converted mana cost with Torrens, Fist of the Angels, a 2/2 human cleric with training that costs 1 green-white. Again, training means that whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, you get a +1 counter on this creature. And with this commander in play, whenever you cast a creature spell, you get a 1/1 green and white human soldier creature token with training. So this commander can very easily build you an army very quickly, and that army can actually grow itself, again, just by swinging and having a bigger creature in play to get more and more counters on everything. And yeah, there are plenty of ways to use and abuse this by, you know, maybe having a creature that can bounce back to your hand. So you just cast it, bounce back to your hand, you get that trigger, you do it again and again and again, and you can build your army very quickly. And obviously in these colors, there are plenty of fantastic pump effects and anthems that can make your army even deadlier, on top of, you know, them just growing themselves naturally with training. So yeah, this low to the ground commander can definitely pack a punch, and in my opinion, definitely deserves to be in the A tier. And the final commander in the A tier, another one that was just short of that S tier, we've got Jacob Hawken, Inspector. And I'm not sure why I say it like that, but I do. Anyways, Jacob Hawken is a 0/2 human advisor for 1 and a blue that has tap, draw a card, then exile a card from your hand face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. You may pay 4 blue. If you do, transform Jacob Hawken Inspector. So first off, with just the front side of this card, well, you're getting fantastic card selection from your commander. It's kind of like a Merfolk Looter in a way in the command zone, kind of like that Jace Friends Prodigy. But you actually get to choose when you want to flip this, though you'd have to pay for that. Regardless, after you've kind of built up those cards in exile and you do want to flip this, go for it, because then it flips into Hawken's Insight. Hawken's Insight is a legendary champion that says at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. So with this, you can keep adding to that exile pile, and then once during each of your turns, you may play a land or cast a spell from among the cards exiled with this permanent without paying its mana cost. Yeah, anytime you can just, you know, cast something that's massive for free, have fun. So the front side of this commander can be great card selection again to, you know, get those, you know, high converted mana cost, big spells out of your hand. And then when you're ready, flip it. And then the backside just lets you cast those massive game-changing, game-ending spells for free. This commander has a ton of potential, and it definitely deserves its place in the A tier. But now it's time to move on from the A tier to the final tier, the best of the best, the cream of the crop with the S tier. These commanders are so powerful that they deserve a tier just for themselves, and actually there's only 2 of them in this set. And the first of these commanders is Gruul Knock the Omnivore. Gruul Knock is a 3/3 frog that costs 2 green-blue. It has, whenever a frog you control attacks, mill 3 cards. That's right, Frog Tribal is finally here. Just kidding. That's not what makes this card powerful, and actually, even if it just said whenever this creature attacks, mill 3 cards, that would still basically be the exact same thing in a lot of circumstances. Regardless, whenever a permanent card is put in your graveyard from your library, exile with a croak counter on it. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards you own in exile with croak counters on them. So yeah, can you say self-mill all permanent deck? Yup. Essentially, with this in play, milling just becomes straight up card advantage since you still have access to those cards once they get crow counters on them. And again, if every single card in your deck is a permanent, you are guaranteed to just keep hitting more and more cards that you get access to. And of course, there are plenty of ways to mill a ton of cards over time, or just mill a massive amount of cards at once, like, half your library, which you then just get access to with this commander. And again, those cards that you are getting access to are in exile, which is incredibly hard for your opponents to ever interact with. They basically can't. I mean, okay, there's like ingest cards or whatnot. I can't remember. There's an Eldrazi mechanic that no one plays that can actually interact with that, but there's very few cards that actually interact with exile, so there's pretty much a protected kind of extra hand for you. And yeah, again, you're just in Simic with this commander, so yeah, that's already just a huge amount of power for this. So yeah, Gruul Knock the Omnivore, you've got a ton of potential, I believe, outside of Frog Tribal, and you definitely deserve to be in the S tier. And joining our froggy friend in the S tier, we've got Ruth Tormented Prophet. Ruth is a 2/4 human wizard for 1 blue-red. She has, if you would draw a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library instead. You may play those cards this turn. Now, I have definitely said that the way that I would personally build this commander is an all-out approach, a go big or go home strategy. Basically, just not caring at all if you have a hand or not, and just going for broke with this commander. Instead of just, drawing a certain amount of cards in a turn, you get access to twice as many cards in a turn. And then you can just cast thing after thing, getting more and more cards that you get access to and storming off and winning from there. And that can definitely be a powerful build. Not saying that you should go in that all-out approach. There's definitely probably a more middle-of-the-road strategy that might be more effective, that you're not just, hey, I'm going hellbent the entire game without a hand. But yeah, the amount of potential this commander has is huge. Again, this commander is very low to the ground. For just 3 mana, you are essentially doubling up on your card advantage. Yes, now it's only temporary card advantage, but still. There are plenty of ways to utilize that where, you're casting, things like maybe a mana geyser and getting a ton of mana that you can spend on other things, or, ways to wheel to give you access to more and more cards. There's a lot of powerful things that you can do with this where, yeah, you can just do a lot of things in one turn, and it's going to be very hard to stop you when you've got access to half your deck in absolutely no time. Kind of like Gruul Knock. Card advantage is powerful. Even temporary card advantage like, Impulse Draws is incredibly powerful. Who knew? So yeah, Ruth Tormented Prophet, you have most definitely, in my opinion, earned your spot in the S tier. And with that, that is every single commander from Innistrad, Crimson Vow, and the precons ranked within my power tiers. And as this episode is coming to a close, I would love to hear from you, so in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on my power tier rankings are. Did I underrate certain commanders? Did I overrate certain commanders? Did I do impressions too often of, what are you buying? Let me know in the comments below, and of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one.